Hello everyone, I hope that you're doing fine. Today I would like to talk about victim mentality. Some of you might relate to it and even know that you actually have such a mindset, and some of you may not have heard about it or know much about it. Well, this concept, as you might guess, refers to one's tendency or habit of blaming other people instead of taking responsibility and being accountable. This happens actually in an unconscious mode and getting reinforced through time. Sometimes people are aware to some extent that they are using this mechanism as a choice to reduce the load of responsibilities and press and to escape from situation at some point. It also happens when you reproach and tend to criticize other people by, for example, expressing disappointment in them for a lack of good behavior, decision, or a conduct that you claim to be as cause for your failure or misfortune. So, in other words, if you have a victim mindset, you have got an external locus of control and not an inner source based on own characteristics, flaws, or strength. Then you have got an external locus of control. You have an unconscious expectation that is not your choices and behaviors and actions which result in success and reinforcement. Instead, you explain the results by external or uncontrollable factors that predict or determine outcomes such as randomness, chance, luck, or other people's choices and actions. Those with victim mentality do some level of externalization of their agency of control and accountability to other people or in their relationships. So it seems at some level to be an issue of control, since the person's mind is at the first place oriented to the factors or situations which are out of his control, while the opposite holds true for a person with an internal locus of control, because then this person can determine and recognize his own contribution and responsibility in shaping success or failure without blaming or putting responsibility on other people. So if we assume that it is partially about pursuing an external source of control to blame, it can also be understood as an indication of a fact that the person has no enough control or insight about his own internal sources. There is not adequate access to the inner world, and so the person's conscious mind is not trained to orient itself inward and check out the possible real reasons and contributing factors within the inner mental sphere of himself. So when victimization process becomes a central part of reaction patterns and person's main functioning relational model, it will widely influence the person's relationships, social relationships. It will also become a coping strategy to manage difficult life experiences, as it may give an illusional sense of less pain and control and also giving a sense of control by reducing the responsibility load and ability to influence the situation. So you can say that by having perpetual tendency to throwing the liability and accountability for certain outcomes out of system, the person not only abuses and harms the others but also himself. So it is actually about a bad relationship with ourselves, right? It can, in many cases, be a response to previous traumatic experiences and events by which the person felt the feelings of powerlessness because of perceived objective threats, psychological or physical violence, and following emotions of helplessness and getting stuck, for having no choice to alter the situation. And therefore, he became underactivated and at some point paralyzed and energyless to fight back, to protect and stand up for himself. So when this particular state of being detached from the inner power, by which the person feels, having no control agency inside himself, takes place frequently and over time and throughout lifespan, the nervous system will learn to shut off and register fear or discomfort when a failure, bad luck, bad outcomes happens to the person. As once back in a time, the actual experience of that person was that it is not my fault and it is others' fault to create this pain for me. I'm enforced into this pain. Also, I do not want it, but I have to bear it because there is no way out of it. I'm stuck. So they learn to be reluctant to responsibility, or not to see that circumstances in life in general is in their control in adulthood. And this may unfortunately get reinforced through years, as by going into this role, they may gain benefits and attention from other people. So it causes also an oversensitivity, in the sense that they can take everything personally, especially in relationships. It becomes so natural to get offended by, for example, a comment or a reaction. So they usually ask themselves, why me? They try to understand what is wrong with them, or what other people continuously see in them that allow themselves to be rude or unfair toward them. So looking at victimhood through a trauma perspective, it makes sense because they tried hardly to make sense of and understand the situations that happen to them all the time. But they could not do that. They could not make it justified and find an answer which could explain enough the strangeness of those repeatedly occurring unpredictable situations. Now, as adults, they fail to recognize their own way of behaving, conceptualization, perceiving things, and mentality of victimhood, as they are at some point convinced and stuck in the belief that this is the other people who are responsible for this awkward situation they are placed in, or for those bad outcomes they get in life. So they usually have multiple arguments and reasons to prove that it is not their fault, it is not their mistake. So these can actually also be seen in those with narcissistic personality traits, as for many of them it is actually scary to admit that they made a mistake, or literally to take responsibility for their bad actions, to recognize, to acknowledge them. The tragic part of the story is that projecting blame outwards and into relationships all the time reinforces and maintains the vulnerability and psychological weakness of not being able to be present for ourselves. It consumes our energy and costs a lot, and sacrifices the magic of safety and connectedness with our true selves. So the first step to healing and coming out from it is to start embracing and reconcile with our past and the inner child's experiences. To remain a victim actually means to unconsciously recognize the truth of the child's story, child who was actually a victim of neglect, abuse, or violence. That is why the nervous system will be locked into this role at the time of bad consequences and painful experiences and outcomes, as getting out of the role means to detaching from the truth of the felt pain of that child. However, this attempt of acknowledging and preserving an old pain costs the person a lot in his life, especially in his social relationships. I remember a client who had always multiple reports on complaints, complaints about, different people who did not help her, who were not willing to help her, employ her, be friend with her, or include her in social settings, since she had been suffering from a disease which influenced her functions for a while. All her reasons and arguments about not succeeding in different life scenarios, life situations, were revolved around the idea that she was sick, and that is why she was not, attractive enough as an employee or friend or partner. But through therapy, she started to realize that she was using victimization as a coping strategy, and that she must reconnect with her inner child, her inner world, who she was scared to see, acknowledge, and take care of. So for her, therapy entailed the process of experiencing the feelings of that child fully, such as rage, such as shame, anger, fear, and so on, and realizing that it is important to pause, to reflect, and come into a new insight and realization of the fact that before searching for immediate comfort following a difficult situation by blaming or getting negative toward people. Of course, it is tough and demands courage and time, but there is no other way to come out from it. When we are constantly enforcing our mind to travel outside of ourselves and search for the reasons, and external sources as fault, excuses, mistakes, we are committing betrayals against ourselves. Responsibility is the ability to respond, to remain accountable, and foster sense of self-sustainability. So victimization paralyzes the ability to take responsibility and creates passivity, about which I have already talked about. So process of empowering yourself begins with provision of awareness and gaining a new understanding of your challenges and strategies and the way you handle your relationships and manage your life. You can use some of your time to reflect on your challenges, the most frequent traps and difficulties, painful experiences which you encounter most frequently. It's so important. So if you recognize tendency of victimizing yourself, you should take an action to make awareness around it, explore your history, or talk with a psychologist. I hope that you have found these reflections as beneficial and interesting. Please keep in touch and share this video with your friends or whoever you think this might be interesting for them. Please keep in touch. We'll connect in the next video. Thank you.